Good evening, brethren. Tonight we're going to study NejemYah chapter 9. The previous chapter ended with Shemini Atzeret right after Sukkot, a feast that they were celebrating for the first time after Yahushua, the successor of Moshe, known as Joshua. So that means that the Feast of Sukkot was not fulfilled at all, pretty much, while they were in the land, for they were kicked out and went on an exile to Babylon. And now in this book, they are coming back. They find the Torah, they read the Torah and realize that they must fulfill the feasts of Leviticus 23, and therefore they celebrated Sukkot, which represents the second Exodus. For Sukkot is a representation of what happened in the first Exodus and what will happen during the second Exodus, right before the harvest of the seventh trumpet, which was represented by Shemini Atzeret in the previous chapter. So after all of that, we come to this ninth chapter, and it begins with verse 1, and it says, "And on the 24th day of this month," as always, as you guys know, this translation is better than several, so that's why we use it. But this is an issue that I have mentioned several times, and I just want to avoid any confusion. Here they write new moon, but moon, you see how like that, because that word is not actually written. So without that word, we would have on the new, right? But that comes from chodesh, right here, la chodesh, which comes from chadash, same letters pronounced differently. Chadash is new. Chodesh is month. Because of the Jewish calendar, which is lunar, they celebrate the new month according to the new moon. So that's why in this translation they write new moon to refer to Chodesh, which is month, which has each month has a certain energy to it, a spiritual energy that pretty much influences people. So that's pretty much one of the reasons why the word Chodesh is connected to Hadash, because a new season begins when the months change. A new energy is influencing people depending on the month in which we are, where the sun is in the firmament, in which constellation, and all of that. So that's pretty much the reason. As I have mentioned, also in Hebrew, there is a word for a lunar month, but it's different than this, and it has as a root moon, yareach. So there is a solar month and a lunar month in Hebrew, and we have here chodesh, which has to do with the regular calendar, which, according to the book of Hanok, is based mainly on the sun, then the stars and the moon. So going back, and on the 24th day of the month, of this month, which would be the seventh month. So look how it's saying the 24th day of this new moon. Obviously, we would understand 24th day from the new moon, but it wouldn't really make much sense to say of the new moon, because the new moon is just the first day of the lunar month. But the 24th day of the month makes a lot more sense, of course. And that's how it is written. So, and on the 24th day, that is 2 days after Shemini Atzeret, 2 days after the last verse of the previous chapter. On this new, of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and in sackcloth and with earth on them, or dust. Let's see how they write it in Hebrew. Adama, yeah, dust, soil. over them, as doing pretty much mourning. So, and on the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and sackcloth and with earth or dust over them, on them. And the descendants of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners and stood and confessed their sins and the crookedness of their fathers. So, as I said, this is an important chapter, for there's a very important prayer that is mentioned throughout this chapter that fits perfectly our time and something that we should pray as Yahweh's people, expecting obviously his redemption, his forgiveness mainly, which we know we receive through Yahushua HaMashiach. So, it is interesting that the previous chapter ended with what represents the time of the harvest, the seventh trumpet, when the chosen few will be gathered and the great tribulation will begin, and the many will be killed to eventually be justified through judgment in order to enter the kingdom as the people of it. So, right after seeing the previous chapter that represented when the chosen few will be gathered during the harvest, then we have this moment in which they were fasting in sackcloth and throwing dust on themselves, which is an act of mourning. Because in this case of what I'm saying, because of what will happen after the seventh trumpet, what will happen to the world. So when the descendants of Israel separated themselves from all foreigners, just like the chosen few will be separated from the world after the harvest, and stood and confessed their sins and the crookedness of their fathers. Obviously, by the time of the harvest, thankfully, there won't be any sin on us. And even the many who had the rebellion of the apostasy would have paid it through the death during the Great Tribulation, the 30 days of Hosea 5:7. But like I'm saying, this is a prayer that we could do, as we are doing at the moment by reading it, so that Yahweh may act as fast as possible and fulfill the redemption. So also, as we know, he will do it at his time, but perhaps he's making us read this at this time because that is the perfect timing for everything to move along. So, and they stood up in their place and read from the book of the Torah of Yahweh, their Elohim, a fourth part of the day. And a fourth part, they were confessing and worshiping Yahweh, their Elohim. So they read for 6 hours. And then they prayed and worshiped and confessed their sins for another 6 hours. That is verse 3. Yeah, a fourth of the day of Hayom. Then it says, well, and I just wanted to read it because it could be, as we know, in Hebrew, well, just like in English, day refers to the 24-hour period, but also refers to the 12 hours of light. So obviously in that case, if we were to separate it in fourths, then we would have 3 hours and 3 hours. If we were speaking about a yum of light. But in general, obviously would be 6 hours and 6 hours, the fourth of a whole day. So, and they stood up in their place and read from the book of the Torah of Yahweh, their Elohim, a fourth part of the day. And a fourth part, they were confessing and worshiping Yahweh, their Elohim. Then Yeshua, as we see That's how it is written. And as I have mentioned, this is the person that appears as Yahushua, whose name is changed to show us an example, a prophetical sign of the name of the Messiah. So here we see that he appears as Yeshua. So then Yeshua and Bani, interesting because Bani means, well, a couple ways in which it could be interpreted. One of those is my son. And like I mentioned, this person appears as Yahushua, who happens to be the son of Yahweh. So then Yahushua and Bani, Kadmiel, NejemYah, Buni, Sherebiah, Bani, Kenani, stood on the stairs of the Levites and cried out with a loud voice to Yahweh their Elohim. So Yeshua, Bani, Kadmiel, NejemYah, Buni, Sherebiah, Bani, and Kenani. So we have 8, which is a number that represents a new beginning. Also, it is, well, Shemini said it is the 8th day, the 8th assembly. And it is when the 7th trumpet will happen and the harvest will manifest, which I mentioned was connected to the previous chapter. Let me see real quick so we can see the meanings of these names one after the other and see the revelation that we would get from those definitions. I have a question here. Is the assembly on the 8th day of Sukkot representative of the day of judgment after the millennium? No, normally the day of judgment is connected to Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is seen as the day of judgment itself. The 8th day of Sukkot represents, well, which is Shemini Atzeret, a whole new feast. For Sukkot has 7 days, but sometimes they call it the 8th day of Sukkot. Is connected to a new beginning, so entering eternity after the millennium, after the judgment day, and also, like I mentioned, with the harvest, the transformation, having a new body to enter a new reality. And one by one, Levi means joined to, or also garland, crown. So I will add both, as in the crown that is joined to the one who he saved. You see how here we have Yeshua, but it says for, meaning that it comes from this, as in, here we see it, a contracted form of, and we see it here, Yahushua, used in the later Hebrew, meaning when it began to be mixed with Aramaic after Babylon, which is when half the people spoke Aramaic and half spoke Hebrew. So that is when they began to change it, at least because we saw that even the name Yahushua of Joshua was changed to Yeshua in the book of Nehemia. So we see that it is a contracted, but it's not the true form. Contracted form, because they are taking 2 letters from the name. To make this name Yeshua, they are taking 2 letters out, and 2 letters that are part of the name of Yahweh, which is huge. And that's why Mashiach said, I come in the name of the Father and you do not receive me. So he came in the name of Yahweh. So that's why the name of Yahweh is in the name of the Messiah, Yahushua. And it says here, using the later Hebrew of Joshua, the leader of the Israelites, of a high priest of the same name, which is the one in Zechariah. All right, so there we see that this Yeshua, which is how some want to call him now, actually comes from the name Yahushua. They write it here as Yehoshua because of the change that they did with the vowels to not pronounce the name of the Father. But that's another story that I won't deal with right now, unless one of you asks. So, as I was saying, the crown that is joined to the one that he saved, or the crown that is joined to Yahushua, the Messiah. Also, we could say, if we only take into account the meaning of Yahushua, the crown that is joined through the salvation of Yahweh, as we know, the crown of life, for instance. So the crown that is joined through the salvation of Yahweh. As I mentioned, Bani would be, well, has two meanings, built, or Beni, in the sense of Ben is son, the Yud would be my son. So already a couple ways in which we could see the first three names. The crown that is joined to Yahushua, my son, or the crown that is joined through the salvation of Yahweh to those whom he built as the temple, the chosen few. For the Elohim of the beginning, Kadmiel, here it says Elohim is the ancient one, he who is before Elohim, obviously not in time, but in presence, because Yahweh made time itself, so there was nothing before Yahweh. Now, if we were to speak about this term, yeah, because that term God refers to an angel. So there was Yahweh, who was before that angel, of course. But when we think of this title as Elohim referring to the Almighty, obviously there was nobody before him. But Yahushua is in the presence of Yahweh, so he is before Yahweh in that sense. But the word here would be Kedem, and that is east, and that is where the light begins. That's why it is related, or it refers to origin, to beginning, to the beginning of time, because the sun comes from the east. So that's why it would be the mighty one of the beginning. It will be connected also with the Son of Righteousness, because the sun comes from the east, just like Mashiach manifested in the east, and he said that he is the light of the world. So there were two, and I will try and keep both until the end, since since there are not that many names. So the crown that is joined to Yahushua, my son, the mighty one who came from the east, the mighty one of the beginning, for everything was created through him, as we know. So even time was created through Mashiach. The other one would be the crown that is joined to those who Yahweh saves, or the crown that is joined through the salvation of Yahweh for those whom he built built as a temple, of course, for the mighty one of the beginning. And they will be increased by Yahweh So we could also say, and Yahweh will increase the building, as we know, not only the few, but also the many. Yahweh will extend his tent, as we see in John 10 and Revelation 7. So Yahweh will extend the building, for Yahweh has scorched, or for the heat of Yahweh has scorched the building. In that case, it would be Yahweh will build with the chosen few the true and new temple, for the heat of Yahweh, the consuming fire, has burned the previous stone temple. Like Mashiach said, not one stone will be on top of the other. And that happened on the year 7. And also, if we see this whole earth as a building, it will be destroyed after the harvest through the 7 plagues. And even after the millennium, Yahweh will make a new earth and a new heavens. So that means this earth will be destroyed. And lastly, my station. My station was the building that Yahweh has scorched, which was for Yahweh will make a building and he will increase it. He will increase the size of it for the many to be in it. The mighty one of the beginning, who will build those whom he saved, to whom he gave a crown, if we add Levite. So I hope that was understood. And I will just say one more with Mashiach as the subject. So the crown will be joined to Yahushua, my son, who is the mighty one of the beginning, who came from the east as the light of the world. All of that with Kadmiel, whom Yahweh will increase and build as a temple. We could also say Yahweh will increase his son, or my son, for that name appears twice, as in the first and the last. And the second, the last, would be an increment on the manifestation of Yahweh, who came as the first. And interestingly enough, the last, who will be the second son, if we see this as Beni, the last is the heat of Yahweh, for he is the consuming fire, just like Mashiach came as the water of life. And he is the heat of Yahweh, who will build, or once again, we have that same word, which would be seen as my son. But in this case, who will build his station, a place for him to dwell, like the chosen few who are his temple. So just because of the fact that there appeared to be a mention of the last, so first and last, I'll say it again, the crown that is joined to Yahushua, my son, the mighty one of the beginning, who came from the east, will be increased by Yahweh through his son, the heat of Yahweh, the consuming fire, who will build my station. So the power of Yahweh will be increased through the last by pretty much multiplying himself by 2. So that having to do with the names here in this chapter. So let me go back. Then Yeshua and Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Buni, Sherebiah, Bani, Kenani stood on the stairs of the Levites and cried out with a loud voice to Yahweh, their Elohim. Then the Levites, Yeshua and Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabneyah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, Petaiah, said. So here we have other ones. Yeshua, Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabneyah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, and Petaiah. So once again, we have 8. They said, rise, bless Yahweh your Elohim forever and ever, and let them bless your esteemed name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. And let them bless your esteemed name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. It is possible that the three, well, we have here Bani, Buni, Bani, which are all written the same. Verse 4, we have Bani, Buni, and Bani. I'm sorry, and Bani. Here is just the Vav, which means N. So we see that they are written the same way. Here we have all the same names, except for 2 of these, Buni and Bani. Instead, we have Hodiah, Petayah, and Hashabneyah, which would be also instead of Kenani, for instance. So we have 3 names that change: Buni, Bani, Kenani, Hashabneyah, Hodiah, and Petayah. So the crown that is joined to Yahushua, the mighty one who came from the east, the mighty one of the beginning, my son, who built the temple also, as he said, destroy the temple and I will build it in 3 days, meaning his resurrection. Also the fact that 3 millenniums will take for the chosen few to be gathered as the temple. So Hasham Naya, whom Yahweh regards, him who Yahweh thinks about, pretty much, also because of the word right here. So the crown is joined to Yahushua, the mighty one of the beginning, who came from the east, my son, who built the temple, whom Yahweh regards. Then we have, once again, Yahweh has scourged through the majesty of Yahweh. As we know, the last is the king, comes as a king, so as majesty, which comes from Hod, splendor. And interestingly, also we could we could rearrange this word and have Yahudah, which is the tribe, obviously, the praise of Yahweh. But anyways, the heat of Yahweh is the majesty of Yahweh, for he comes as a king, who will be increased by Yahweh or multiply, or also the increment of Yahweh, as we saw in the previous verse with the other names, as first being increased by the manifestation of the last, who is the heat of Yahweh, who will be freed by Yahweh, freed from this reality. Also, Petayah would be the door of, Yahweh opens, Yahweh opening the door, because of this, patach, to open. So in that case, the crown that is joined to Yahushua, the mighty one of the beginning, who came from the east, my son, who built the temple, is whom Yahweh regards. The heat of Yahweh is the majesty of Yahweh, that Yahweh will increase in order to open the door to eternity. As we know, Yahushua is the door, and the last is the good shepherd who opens the door. So, and the good shepherd is also the heat of Yahweh, the consuming fire. So just like we saw in the previous verse, a representation of first and last, we kind of have it also here, and showing how the last comes to open the door. Continue. Then the Levites Yeshua and Kadmiel, Bani, Hashabneyah, Sherebiah, Hodiah, Shebaniah, Petayah said, rise, Bless Yahweh your Elohim forever and ever, and let them bless your esteemed name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. Your esteemed name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. Yet they say the name doesn't matter. So they claim that they praise and bless the Almighty, yet claim the name doesn't matter. However, the scripture says that the name is exalted above all blessing and praise. So how can they say that it doesn't matter? If you don't respect the name, then you are not blessing nor praising, no matter what you do afterwards, because the name is above all. So you must first respect the name, and then everything comes together. After respecting the name, you praise it, you bless it. But if you don't care about the name, then who are you praising? Who are you blessing? So that's why his esteemed name is exalted above all blessing and praise. Just like it's written that Yahushua's name is above all names. And it is the name that it was given to man under heaven so that man can be saved. The only name for salvation. So, and let them bless your esteemed name, which is exalted above all blessing and praise. You are Yahweh, you alone. You have made the heavens. Let me see this verse 6. Ata hu Yahweh. You are him, Yahweh. Ata hu Yahweh. Lebadecha. And only you. So, you are Yahweh, you are you alone. You have made the heavens of the heavens. This is important because throughout Judaism, before Mashiach came, the Yahudim spoke of 7 heavens. Those 7 heavens where the angels would reside were all that people knew regarding the celestial before Mashiach came. Then Mashiach came and said that nobody had ascended to heaven, even though we have Enoch, and Eliyahu, Elijah, going to heaven, and Moshe going to heaven to get the tablets. So Mashiach said that they didn't go to heaven, so that would mean they didn't go to the heaven of the heavens, the highest heaven, which is called the third heaven by Paul in the New Covenant. So the third heaven is the heavens of the heavens. The second heaven is the heavens. And the first heaven is the firmament, where the stars are what we see, the heaven of the earth. So there's the firmament, the first heaven, the second heaven, that of the angels, and then the heaven of the heavens, which is the third heaven, that where Yahweh is, and hence Mashiach came. Nobody had or has ascended other than Mashiach to that heaven. And that is why after Mashiach came, and we see Paul speaking about 3 heavens, then we see through the Gnostic books that they speak of an 8th heaven. So the third, I repeat, is Yahweh's heaven. The second is the heaven of the angels. And that heaven has 7 dimensions, 7 realities, or 7 heavens. So that's why the third heaven is the 8th, for it is above the 7, which are within the second heaven. So within the second heaven, there are 7 levels. And after that second heaven comes the third, which seen as after those 7 levels would be the 8th. Hope that's understood. But the point is here, you see that there are heavens, and then there are heavens of those heavens. So even the angels have a heaven, meaning something above them, and that is Yahweh's authority. So you are Yahweh, you alone, you have made the heavens of the heavens. That is verse 6 still. So let me go see it real quick right here. So it says, Asita ed hashamayim Shemei Hashamayim. You did the heavens. Look how it says Et Hashamayim. Aleph Taf Hashamayim, as it is in Bereshit, when it says Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashamayim et haaretz. So et Hashamayim, meaning that through the Aleph Taf, the Aleph Bet, from Aleph to Taf, with the Aleph Taf, because he used the word to create everything, he made the heavens, Hashamayim. Shemei Hashamayim, that is the heavens of the heavens. Because when there is a construct like here, the heavens of the heavens, if the first word ends with a mem, like shamayim right here, that letter is taken out. So that's why it says Shemei Hashamayim. Shemei Hashamayim. So the interesting thing here is that, well, two things that I want to show. Let's go to translator for a moment. If we were to write Shamayim, look how it begins. Shin, then mem. That is the mem that is in the middle of words. So that's why it hasn't given me a word yet, the translator. But if I were to change it with the last mem, meaning the mem that appears at the end of words, but it's still the same letter, would be this. We have name. So in fact, since it ends with mem, it has that letter at the very end, so I will add letters in the middle. We have shin, which represents fire, and we have mem, which represents water. So the heavens are made of a combination of fire and water. This reality is where there is duality, heat and cold, and water and fire are enemies. They fight each other. Fire puts out water. Water puts out fire, and fire can heat water so much that it makes it disappear. Obviously through vapor. So there are enemies in this reality, but in the heavens, everything is one. So water and fire are not enemies, they are one. So that's why heavens was made through fire and water. And that is why also the first and the last are the water of life and the consuming fire, because through the first and the last, the will of the heavens will be fulfilled on earth. How? Through the name, which is Shem Mem. So Shem is the name that gives us the power in order to bring the heavens to this reality, for the will of Yahweh to be done on earth as it is in heaven. So we see a clear connection first of the word name, which is Shem, with fire and water. Water is the first manifestation of the Almighty, the water of life, and the fire is the last manifestation. And through these two, fire and water, we get the heavens, because let me add a mem here. And then a yud here. We have, they write sky, but you can see that it's heaven. So they're translating that as heaven, but that is paradise. Gan Haiden, the Garden of Eden. So just to show how this is not completely perfect. But anyways, Shamaim, they write sky because they are referring to the firmament. But anyways, you saw heavens right under it. Remember how in Hebrew, this Yud Mem is the plural. So that's why Elohim is plural. Rachamim, plural. Tehilim, plural. etc., etc., etc. Im is plural, masculine, plural for a masculine word. So this is interesting because if this is Shem and this is the plural, then we could see Shamaim also as Shemim, which would be names, right? Is that understood? So the heaven is filled with names because that is power. Heaven is made of names. I hope that's understood. Now, this is going to be also, well, interesting. If we write Shemot, you see they write names. Why? Because this refers to the feminine. Ot is the plural of feminine words, as in ruchot, the plural of ruach. Sukkot, plural of sukkah. So ot is the plural of feminine words. Heaven is masculine, earth is feminine. So that's why the heavens, the name of heavens in Hebrew, Shamaim, refers to masculine names as in authority, and earth, feminine names as in people, nations, which are represented by feminine, which were made from Adamah, from the soil, from the earth. So we see names. And also, just in case, look how Shemot, if you go down here, it should have it. No, they don't have it. Shemot is the name of the second book of scriptures, known as Exodus. Shemot is the actual name of what is known as Exodus. And it has to do with the names of the people, the descendants of Jacob who enter Egypt. So I hope that's understood. Heaven can be seen as the mix of fire and water. Also, names of authority, the names of Yahweh and his son Yahushua, the name of the first and the last as well, and other things. Also, this Yam is, if we were to take this as just one word, is the sea. Sea, Yam, like the Yam Suf. And as we know, scripture says that the firmament is like a sea of glass. We see in Revelation 15 that the chosen few will be over a sea of glass, singing the song of Moshe and the Lamb, Revelation 15, a sea of glass. So a Yam, a sea. That's why Yahweh separated the waters below from the waters above. There are waters above, and therefore there is a Yam in the Shamaim of water mixed with fire, because there is water above and there are stars. So within the firmament, there is water mixed with fire, because Yahweh separated the waters above from those below, and he put the luminaries in the firmament where that water above was. So the mix of fire and water is also seen in our firmament through the stars. And when you get really close to the light of the stars, you can see how it looks that is going through water. So all of that just to explain how Shemei Hashamaim had to be written like that. The sky, well, they say the sky is the sky, but actually should be the heaven of the heavens. Heavens of the heavens. But we could also say here, my name is the heavens. Shemi. My name, the heavens. And as we know, people who would see the pronunciation of the name of the Almighty as a sin would replace the name of Yahweh with the word heavens, like when they say for heaven's sake, and stuff like that. And they used to do it way back. So they would say Hashamayim to refer to he who dwells in the Shamayim. So now let me go back. You are Yahweh, you alone. You have made the heavens of the heavens, with all their host, the earth and all that are on it, the seas and all that are in them, and you give life to them all. And the host of the heavens are bowing themselves to you. You are Yahweh, the Elohim, who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldees and gave him the name Abraham. So look how it goes all the way to the first of the patriarchs. As we know, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov represent Yahweh first and last. Yahweh as the Messiah and the prophet, like Moshe. You are Yahweh, the Elohim who chose Abraham. So also this is as once the chosen few are gathered through the harvest, and the many as the grapes of the harvest in the winepress. Then, in a way, there will be a recount of everything that happened in history through those who are righteous until our point in which Yahweh will fulfill the transformation promised throughout scriptures. So, you are Yahweh, the Elohim who chose Abram and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and gave him the name of Abraham. That is verse 7. And since we have the Hebrew here, I'll just do it real quick, show how we have Abram, and then we have here Abraham. So we see the difference is that Yahweh added the letter Hey. The letter Hey represents spirit. So it means that Yahweh gave spirit to Abram. He gave the Ruach, so he became Abraham. The Torah has 5 books. The Hey has a numerical value 5. So also as showing that Abraham would be the patriarch written of in the Torah who would have the faith that will be counted as righteousness, as the fulfillment of the Torah. Also, Abraham was not destined to have children. So Yahweh changed his name to Abraham in order to give him Yitzhak. You are Yahweh, the Elohim who chose Abraham and brought him out of Ur of the Chaldeans and gave him the name of Abraham, and found his heart trustworthy before you, and made a covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites. They were like parasites. That's why they had to be taken out. So the verse 8, let me just see. I won't see those names. I have done it several times in the past. Those names of the lands that were given to Israel, representing all the lands of the earth. So it says here to give the land of HaCanani, HaChiti, HaEmori, HaPerizi, HaYebuzi, HaGirgashi, to them, and to give it to his seed. So the Canaanites, Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Jebusites, and the Girgashites, to give it to his seed. And you have established your words, for you are righteous. So they were entering the land for a second time. And they are saying this. That second time, well, after going to Babylon, they are now entering the land again as a representation of the second Exodus. That's why they are going to build the second temple, They are returning a second time from Babel, which means confusion, like the confusion of the apostasy. That's why the apostasy comes from the great whore of Babylon, which is a spiritual entity, is not a geographical place, even though it existed, obviously, and it does exist as a geographical place. It refers to the spirit of confusion. So this prayer, I repeat, is like the prayer we must do now so that Yahweh will bring redemption in our time and the second Exodus will fulfill. So when you have established your words, for you are righteous, and saw the affliction of our fathers in Mizraim, and heard their cry by the sea of reeds, the Yam Suf, and gave signs and wonders against Pharaoh and against all his servants and against all the people of his land. So look how it goes from Abraham straight to the Exodus. Like I mentioned, Abraham represents the Almighty Creator. Also, I have mentioned since Abraham appears as a father. In fact, father is part of the meaning of the name. Yitzhak appears as the son of the promise. So even though Yitzhak became a father and a patriarch, his position, his image throughout scriptures is as the promised seed, the son. That's why he represents, well, not the only reason, but many reasons why he represents Mashiach, Yahushua, the son of Yahweh. The last is represented by Yaakov, who came from Yitzhak. But Yaakov became the father of the 12 tribes. So he also represents a father, just like Abraham. That to represent that the last comes as a father, as a representation of Yahweh the Father, while Mashiach came as a representation of the Father, but as a son. So Mashiach came as a son, the last comes as a father. That's why they are represented by Yitzhak and Yaakov. But since Abraham is also a representation of a father, of the Father, then Yaakov and Abraham have that connection. And therefore, Abraham is also connected with the last. That's why Abraham, as the father of multitudes, connects with the last, because the last will become the father of the many. In a way, they will be given to him after the whole ordeal of the end times. And Abraham took Yitzhak, his son, to be sacrificed. And that represents how the last will have to take one of his spiritual children, the witness like Eliyahu, to be sacrificed with him. So that is like Abraham taking Yitzhak, now the witness like Moshe taking the witness like Eliyahu, to the moment when they will both be killed. So the moment when Abraham took Yitzhak to be sacrificed represents the sacrifice that Yahweh allowed of Mashiach, his son. And that's why Abraham prophesied and said, Yahweh will provide a lamb. Yahweh yireh lo haseh. Yahweh will provide for himself a lamb. That lamb is Mashiach. But we see in the story in Genesis that right after he said that, Yahweh provided at that moment a ram, not a lamb, but a ram. So they sacrificed the ram instead of Yitzhak. So that shows that the lamb that Abraham spoke of was Mashiach, who came afterwards, later on. But that ram represents the witness like Eliyahu. Like I always mentioned, in Yom Kippur, there was a sacrifice of the male goat, which represents Mashiach Yahushua. There were two male goats, just like Mashiach was placed right next to Barabbas. One was chosen for sacrifice, one was freed in the desert, like Barabbas. Then they would sacrifice an ox that represents the descendant of Ephraim, the last, and then they sacrifice a ram that represents Eliyahu. So the two witnesses will be killed in Yom Kippur, and Yahushua was killed in Pesach, but he was also killed as the male goat of Yom Kippur. So that first part of the two male goats has been fulfilled already. Now the two witnesses as the ox and the ram need to be killed, sacrificed on Yom Kippur to be for that feast to be fulfilled completely. So that moment in which Abraham sacrificed or was about to sacrifice Yitzhak represents two things: Yahweh allowing his son Mashiach to be sacrificed, the lamb that he provided, and also the last allowing the witness like Eliyahu to also be sacrificed with him. So goes from Abraham, being Abraham a representation of the Father Almighty, the beginning of the faith that brings righteousness. And right after that, the chapter goes to the Exodus. Just like in the end times, the last, as a representation of the Father, comes to seal the 144,000 who are his children through the name of the Son, as we see in John 1. So the last comes as the Father to seal the 144,000, and then the second Exodus will happen. So look how it goes in verse 9. It says, "And saw the affliction of our fathers in Mizraim, the land of two borders, of two limits that connects spiritually with the earth itself, for it is a land of affliction, like Mizraim is called spiritually in Genesis, and also is a land of two limits, beginning and end. It will have an end, for it had a beginning. So, and saw the affliction of our fathers in Mizraim, and heard their cry by the Sea of Reeds," which would be during the actual Exodus, right? When the chosen few will have to flee. I mean, this is what would represent, for this happened when Israel came out of Egypt. "And gave signs and wonders against Pharaoh," referring to the plagues, "and against all his servants and against all the people of his land, for you knew that they acted proudly against them." Look how Yahweh hates pride in this, obviously the evil type, as in the one that they celebrate a lot, like they have a whole month of it. They acted proudly. Because of the fact that they acted proudly against Israel, Yahweh came against all the people of his land. And that is something that is happening now. For instance, people, well, since, like I mentioned just to begin with, homosexuals have so much power nowadays because people in power have those tendencies, and they want to turn most people as most people as they can, so that will help with the population, depopulating the earth as they want, with also the injections and all of that. So they have that Pride Month and all of the things that they say having to do with pride, and they do act prideful, and they kind of act hateful towards those who do not agree, even sometimes with people that do agree, sadly, even sometimes with their own. For instance, like you may have seen the Dave Chappelle special, in which he actually did it real nice, and he spoke of a story of a friend of his who was transsexual, and he helped, and the transsexual sacrifice, I mean, committed suicide, and then the transsexuals, well, that transsexual committed suicide because a bunch of transsexuals were going against him because he spoke in favor of Dave Chappelle. And after that suicide, they didn't care at all that because of their bullying, one of them had killed himself. And Dave Chappelle is telling this story, which should make people think, and should make them, transsexuals, think about the way they act and how they, well, what they think and all of that. Instead, they have been trying to cancel him in every way possible. Like they say nowadays, right? They're trying to cancel Dave Chappelle as if he was making fun of transsexuals, when he did not at all do that during the whole special. He was actually so respectful and so careful. He was very smart about it, but he was I would say even a bit too careful. But uh, I understand the pressure that he must feel being in that level. So I was surprised of how careful he was, and then how people reacted and how they were speaking about canceling him. So, anyways, that type of pride. Then we have the pride of people who um, believe the injection works or doesn't, because it does work, but for what they want, not for what people think. So those who think that the injection will heal them and help them and protect them from all disease, well, obviously they think only of COVID now, the only disease going around, and they feel so proud about what they believe and about having the injection that they talk to people who don't have it as if they were stupid, evil, uh, and a bunch of other things that they label us as. So that pride, Yahweh hates it, and Yahweh will act on this earth because of the proud actions that many are committing against uh, his people. So for you knew that they acted proudly against them, and you made a name for yourself as it is this day. Through the plagues, Yahweh made a name for himself. He made himself known throughout the world. The Egyptians did not know the name of the Most High. That's why Moshe asked for the name of Yahweh. When Moshe went to Pharaoh and he said, I come in the name of Yahweh, Pharaoh looked in his books of all the names of the gods of the earth, and he didn't find Yahweh. He didn't find Yahweh, so he didn't believe Moshe, and that's why the first plague came, pretty much, in a few words. As Moshe said, you are looking for the living mighty one amongst the dead, when he was looking in his books of idols. So Yahweh made a name for himself through the plagues, for every nation heard what happened to Egypt. The strongest nation of the moment was destroyed by the Most High for acting proudly against his people. Obviously, that pride led to slavery and all the pain that Israel had to go through. You made a name for yourself as it is this day. Just like now, the name of Yahushua will be made known throughout the world through his people. Obviously, next to the name of Yahushua is the name Yahweh. So my point is, the name of Yahweh was made known through the first Exodus. Now the name of Yahushua needs to be known through the second Exodus, so that Yahweh, Yahushua, will be known throughout history. So, and you split the sea before them, and they passed over into the midst of the sea on the dry land. This, in the spiritual, refers to how the chosen few will go from this life to the next without having to experience death, just like they went from one side to the other side of the sea without getting wet. And the sea, like I mentioned, has to do with Shamaim, the sea in the heavens, the waters above. For the Shamaim is like a sea of glass, also, as we see in Revelation 15, where the chosen few will be gathered to sing the song of Moshe and the Lamb. And you split the sea before them, and they passed over into the midst of the sea on the dry land. And their pursuers you threw into the deep as a stone into the mighty waters. And their pursuers you threw into the deep of the sea, of course, but this connects also with the bottomless pit, the deep in Sheol, as a stone into the mighty waters. Like in the book of Revelation, we see the falling of the whore of Babylon in the same way, described in the same matter, as a stone into the mighty waters. And you led them by day with a cloudy column, That represents, you remember that in the temple, there were two pillars or columns at the entrance of the temple, named Yakin and Boaz. He who establishes with strength, Yakin and Boaz. Yahushua came to make the new covenant or establish it as the pillar named Yakin. And the last comes with strength, with the strength given by the first, for we can do all things through Mashiach who strengthens us. So the last comes with strength to establish the kingdom with Mashiach came to offer. So Yakin and Boaz, the two pillars as first and last. Those two pillars or columns were represented also by the cloudy column or the pillar of a cloud that led them in the desert. Clouds bring water, right? Rain comes from clouds. Yahushua is the water of life. So Mashiach was represented by that cloudy column. Yahushua the first, the water of life, who came during the spiritual day. That's why you led them by day with a cloudy column, and by night with a column of fire. The consuming fire, the last who comes like a thief in the night. So the last comes during the spiritual night, the end times, as the consuming fire, who is the column known as Boaz, to give them light in the way they were to go. So Yahushua came as the way during the day, as the water of life, therefore represented by the cloudy column that led them by the day. The last comes as the column of fire, as the thief in the night, to give light, for he's the consuming fire and the son of righteousness, in the way they were to go. The last comes to give testimony of Yahushua, who is the way. So through the testimony of the last, people will know the way they are to go. And you came down on Mount Sinai. You came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from the heavens and gave them straight, right rulings and Torah of truth, good laws and commands. Torah is the plural of Torah. Torah is feminine, ends with a hey, pronounced a, Torah, therefore feminine. So Torah in plural, as in laws. And of truth, it says here, traditional render laws of truth, of which we also read in Malachi 2:6, while it is rendered in Romans 2:20 as the truth in the law. Torah of truth, translated as laws of truth, but also rendered as the truth in the law in Romans 2:20. This is verse 13. It says, here it is, Vetorot emet, Torot emet. Look how truth is this word, right? Emet. The first letter of the Aleph Bet or Aleph Tav, however you want to call it, the first letter and the last, as in first and last, right? In the middle, we put the fountain of life, which is the Mem, and we have truth. So the truth comes from the first and the last, connected by the water of life, by the source, which is the Almighty Creator, and also the Mem has the numerical value of 40. So between the first and the last, there would be 40 jubilees. 40 jubilees are 2,000 years. A jubilee is 50 years. So 40 times 50, we have 2,000. So first, Yahushua came, then 40 jubilees, and the last comes to seal the chosen few at the very end. Emet. So in truth, we have first and last. Remember, I have mentioned how the Golem is a creature that they would make, they say, using Jewish witchcraft pretty much. But the way they explain it is they would make a body of clay, what would seem like a human body of clay, and then they would put a scroll in the mouth of the golem, or write on their forehead the word emet. But if they were to take the first letter out, then the golem would die, because met is dead, as in meta, what they just rename Facebook, right? Meta. But going back to met, this is interesting because that means if you take Yahushua the first, who is life, from the truth, all you have is death. If you take Mashiach out, you have no truth, all you have is death. And well, there are obviously more things that we could get from here. Remember that from Mashiach, who is the first, and the strength represented by the Aleph, came water and blood from his side at the cross. Remember that in pictographic alphabet, the Tav is a cross, the Mem is water, the waves of water, and the Aleph is an ox representing strength. So the strength of the first, who is the water of life that was spilled on the cross, he is the truth. So now going back to Torot Emet. And you came down on Mount Sinai and spoke with them from the heavens and gave them straight, right rulings and Torot Emet, good laws and commands. And you made known to them your set apart Shabbat. And you commanded them commands and laws and Torot by the hand of Moshe, your servant. From this verse in Judaism, they interpret that the Shabbat, the commandment of the Shabbat, is equivalent to all the commandments of scriptures. Because here Yahweh says, and you made known to them your set apart Shabbat, and you commanded them commands and laws and Torot. So he's saying that the Shabbat is as important as all the rest of the laws. Now, in the spiritual sense, through the Ruach HaKodesh, through Mashiach, we understand that the true Shabbat, the main Shabbat, we have a representation of the true Shabbat every week, every seventh day. But the true Shabbat is the millennium, for Yahweh made everything in 7 days to show that history will last 7,000 years. For to Yahweh, 1 day is like to us, 1,000 years, to Yahweh, 1 day. So 1 day like 1,000 years. 7 days for the creation, 7,000 years for humanity. The seventh day of creation was for rest, the Shabbat. So the seventh millennium is for rest from sin, because the wages of sin is death. So that means that people in this reality work for sin, and they receive as a payment death. So we enter the Shabbat when that doesn't happen anymore, when people no longer work or are slaves to sin. So we enter into life in the millennium. That's why also Mashiach said, when he was told that he was breaking the Shabbat by the Pharisees, he said, my father works until now and I work. By saying my father has been working until now means he hasn't rested. meaning we haven't come to the actual Shabbat. They were seeing the 24-hour Shabbat. They didn't understand the 1,000-year Shabbat, which is the actual Shabbat. And the only way to enter that Shabbat is through Yahushua, who fulfilled all the Torah. So that's why it is so important to know the true Shabbat as all the commandments, because it is through all the commandments that Mashiach fulfilled that we are able to enter the Shabbat in which we will rest from sin. I hope that's understood. So, and you made known to them your set apart Shabbat. He has made known to us the set apart Shabbat, that is the millennium, which we can enter through Mashiach. And you commanded them commands and laws and Torah by the hand of Moshe, your servant. So when it comes to names of people, it goes from Abraham to Moshe. Like I said, the witness like Moshe is also represented by Abraham. So it's interesting to see those two names. The exalted father. First, the exalted father who became the father of multitudes, who was taken out of water, meaning of Abraham, and Moshe. Taken out of water represents being resurrected, for water represents death. Therefore, the immersion in the Jordan River represented the death of Mashiach. And when people are immersed in water, represents the fact that they are dying to what they were and coming up as a new person, Mashiach in them. So, and you made known to them your set apart Shabbat. And you commanded them commands and laws and Torah by the hand of Moshe, your servant. And you gave them bread from the heavens for their hunger. And you gave them bread from the heavens for their hunger, which is the manna, as we know, and the manna, which in Hebrew is man, the man, which is interesting because in English, man is a human. And I say that because the manna, or the heavenly bread, is Mashiach, who came as a man. So when you gave them bread from the heavens for their hunger, when we were spiritually hungry, Yahweh gave us truth, which is Yahushua, the heavenly bread, and brought them water out of the rock for their thirst. When we were spiritually thirsty, he gave us the water of life, which came or comes from the rock. Mashiach, the strong rock. Mashiach, the cornerstone. So, and brought them water out of the rock for their thirst. So Moshe, now the witness like Moshe in the end times, preparing the people for the Shabbat, the millennium, giving them the commandments through the Ruach HaKodesh, meaning the true understanding of them, not through the letter, but through the spirit, so that they could be fed with the bread from the heavens and the water out of the rock. That is Mashiach, Yahushua. So it is the last given testimony of Mashiach to the few and to the many. Bread and water, the few and the many. Those who will become the temple and those who will have to die. The few and the many, bread and water. Those who can take solid foods and those who cannot, for they are not spiritually grown. They are just children spiritually. So, and you gave them bread from the heavens for the few, for their hunger, and brought them water out of the rock for their thirst. Both of them are Mashiach, but there are two different teachings of Mashiach. For instance, the hunger that comes from not knowing, not understanding. And the thirst, for instance, that the many have for life, but they are not really that interested in getting to really understand. So they don't have that much hunger for knowledge. So when you gave them bread from the heavens for their hunger, and brought them water out of the rock for their thirst, and said to them to go in to possess the land which you had sworn to give them, through the last who is like Moshe, Yahweh prepares the few for the Shabbat, the millennium, by giving them the commandments to the Ruach, giving testimony of Mashiach to the few and to the many, so that they can go and possess the land that Yahweh has promised. But they and our fathers acted proudly and hardened their necks and did not obey your commands. Once again, acted proudly. So the Egyptians acted proudly against us, so Yahweh destroyed them. We acted proudly when we were given the land, so Yahweh took us out of the land into Babylon. But they and our fathers acted proudly and hardened their necks and did not obey your commands. And they refused to obey, and they remembered not your wonders that you did among them, and hardened their necks. And in their rebellion, they appointed a leader to return to their bondage. So we see how through the apostasy, through the last 40 jubilees, just like Israel, for instance, during those 40 years in the desert, during the last 40 jubilees, the people fell in the apostasy, and they will appoint a leader, the beast, then the false prophet, and then the false Messiah. And they refused to obey the true doctrine, right? Brought by the witness like Moshe. And they remembered not your wonders. In this case, when we take it to our time, the wonders that he actually did through Mashiach, which are greater, of course, than those in the Exodus, but obviously both count, that you did among them, and hardened their necks, and in their rebellion, which is a translation of apostasy. So we could say, and in their apostasy. I say that because the word apostasy is normally used in Christianity to refer to something that would happen in the end times as they interpret the word in the New Covenant. But apostasy is a Greek word that means rebellion. So the apostasy has happened many times in history. Now, the apostasy of the end times will be the worst, of course. But my point is that in Christianity, they tend to see apostasy as only something specific that would happen in the end. Yet, by seeing the word rebellion here, we see that it represents the apostasy in which Christianity is at the moment. So, and in their apostasy, they appointed a leader to return to their bondage. That is also interesting because Yahushua came to redeem us from bondage to sin and to the letter, for the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. So through the Ruach HaKodesh, we were supposed to understand the Torah and fulfill it as we were taught by Mashiach. Yet people decided to reject Mashiach, appoint a leader, and go back to the letter, go back to bondage. But you are a forgiven Eloah, showing favor and compassionate, patient, and of great love and commitment, and did not forsake them. And they refused to obey, and they remembered not your wonders that you did among them, and hardened their necks. And in their rebellion, they appointed a leader to return to their bondage. But you are a forgiven Eloah, showing favor and compassionate, patient, and of great love and commitment, and did not forsake them. So it says, you are a forgiven Eloah, showing favor, compassionate, patient, and of great love and commitment. Like I mentioned, the number 5 represents favor, as what he did there. And then, and did not forsake them, that would be the 6th. And that is number of men. For men was made on the 6th day. Even when they made a molded calf for themselves, even when they made a molded calf for themselves. As we know, this is the golden calf, which represents the false Messiah. They made the golden calf right at the beginning of the 40 years in the desert. So it represents the image, the idol that they created. As we know, we were told not to make images of anything in heavens, on earth, or under the earth. We were also told to respect the Almighty and give honor to his name, and also the name of his son once he manifested. So when the church decided to make another name, Jesus, and then decided to give an image to that name and make idols for people to worship those idols, that Jesus and that image that everybody knows as Jesus, that is the golden calf. That's what the golden calf represented. The golden calf in the beginning of the Exodus, because right after Israel was in Egypt and they sacrificed a lamb, Yahweh allowed them to get out. But right after that, they made a golden calf. Then 2000 years ago, Mashiach came and was sacrificed as the lamb in the same day, Pesach, the same day as in the Exodus. Mashiach was sacrificed as the lamb. But then right after they were taken out of the bondage to sin, they started to form, because they did not know when he would come back, they decided to make an image and give it a name and follow that image and name throughout the apostasy. So the golden calf in the Exodus is a representation of the false Messiah, whose image and name they have been worshiping for hundreds of years. So even when they made a molded calf for themselves and said, "This is your mighty one," just like they say of the idol, "This is your mighty one that brought you up out of Mizraim and worked great blasphemies." Just like they look at that image, that idol, and they say, "Jesus is the one who died for your sins," when no Jesus has come to die for nobody's sins. Yahushua is the person who came and died for our sins, and he doesn't look at all like Jesus. Yet they look at Jesus and they say, "This is the mighty one that brought you up out of Mizraim." A friend of mine was telling me that the other day he was talking to his father, who is was hopefully a Catholic, and he had an image of what they call the Last Supper. And his father told him that he was reading Jeremiah. So my friend was all happy because he thought he was understanding Jeremiah. So he showed how Jeremiah was speaking about the images and how they call a wood a father, and then they call stone mother, or vice versa. The fact is that they call things father and mother, gods, and all of that. So he then turned to the Last Supper and said, "That is not who died for us. That is not who you think it is." And he was shocked and he was surprised, and as if his son, my friend, one of the brethren of the congregation, was saying a blasphemy or something. And it's amazing how far many of the people in Christianity are from the truth, how far they are from the truth, and how much they love the image and that false name that they defended, not understanding that is not the name, that is not the real name. And if he, the Messiah, is the truth, how can you call him by a false name? It makes no sense. How can you believe so many lies about the truth himself? And then to say that it doesn't matter, that shows that to that person, truth doesn't matter. And if truth doesn't matter, then nothing matters. And that person is not free, because it is truth that makes us free. And you shall know the truth, and you shall be free. They are not free because they do not know the truth even to get to the point of accepting the truth. So anyways, this is your mighty one that brought you up out of Mizraim and worked great blasphemies. Yet you, in your great compassion, did not forsake them in the wilderness. Did not forsake them in the wilderness. Yahweh did not forsake those who believe throughout the 2,000 years that have passed since Mashiach came. The column of the cloud did not turn away from them by day to lead them on the way, nor the column of fire by night to give them light in the way they were to go. And this is interesting because that would make them think that Yahweh was with them, that Yahweh was fine with all of the things that they were doing. Obviously, we have a lot of details in the book of Exodus, Numbers, and all of that regarding what happened there and how Yahweh would forgive them once over and over again. But my point here is that just like when you talk to a person, a Christian, and you tell them that the name is Yahushua, for instance, they say that doesn't matter. They say, but I have called in the name of Jesus and he has answered. So he's like saying, but the cloud, the column of a cloud has been going with me. So that means that he's fine with me. Not understanding that that is just because he has great compassion, that he does not forsake his people even while they are in the apostasy. There is a huge verse. This, I believe, is huge in the sense of what it means and the fact that Jewish people don't see it and Christians don't, I think, don't understand it really. In the book of the prophet Amos, so meaning in the what they call the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, chapter 5, we go to verse 20. No, 26. It says, but you took up, here they translated a bit different than I would translate it, and I will show why, but I'll just read it in this translation, it doesn't matter. But you took up Sikut, your sovereign, and Kium, your idols, your astral mighty ones, which you made for yourselves. So, but you took up, so I'm gonna go back to 25. You brought me slaughterings and meal offerings in the wilderness for 40 years of house of Israel. Here, well, yeah, this translation is a bit different than I expected. It's fine because I will look at the Hebrew for a moment, but like if we see it in the Hebrew, verse 26, says you took Sikut. This could be read as Sukkot, which is important because of what Sukkot represents and a bunch of other reasons. But Sukkot means they translate it as tabernacles. So that's why normally this translation, I mean, this verse is translated as you have taken the tabernacle of your Moloch. Moloch is a false deity, as we know. Moloch, which comes from Melech. That's why they wrote, you took the Sikot of your sovereign, of your king. But others translated as the tabernacle of your Moloch, which means that the presence that they had in the tabernacle, the presence that they had with them was that of Moloch and that of Kium. Moloch is Jupiter, so Zeus, and Kium is Saturn. So pretty much they were worshiping Halel and Samael instead of worshiping Yahweh. They were following two entities that are evil, Halel and Samael. And it says here, we can see this being confirmed in Acts 7:43, and I will read it real quick. Acts 7:43. We have that it says, so I will read 42. So Elohim turned, listen to this. I'm going to go back to 41. Well, 40, saying to Aharon, make us mighty ones to go before us. For this Moshe who led us out of the land of Mizraim, we do not know what has become of him. So it will be like people in church saying, for instance, to the Pope, the first Pope, we don't know when that Messiah is going to come, so just make us an image that we can follow. Who led us out of the land of Mizraim, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days and brought an offering to the idol and were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. They were rejoicing in the works of their own hands. So Elohim turned and gave them up. This is huge. So Elohim turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven. So they began to worship the angels. They began to worship Lucifer and his angels without knowing it. This is huge, like I mentioned, because it is not only in the New Covenant, it's also in the Old Covenant. So even Jewish people have that prophecy from Amos, but they don't accept that, of course. As it has been written in the book of the prophets, did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness of house of Israel? So I came to read here because in the previous one from Amos, the translation was a bit different, and they didn't have this as a question. They had it as a statement. You brought offerings to me, but you were worshiping Moloch and Kium. Instead, we see Paul explaining it as that verse saying, did you bring slaughtered beasts and offerings unto me during 40 years in the wilderness of house of Israel? That's a rhetoric question saying, no, not really. You thought it was to me, but it wasn't. That's why it says, and you took up the tent of Moloch. You see how they, even the same translation writes it different when it quotes Amos. And you took up the tent of Moloch and the star of your mighty one Kium, the star. So they began to use the six-pointed star in the 40 years that they were in the desert. That six-pointed star is the star of Molech and Kium, images which you made to bow before them, like the pyramid or the triangle going up and the triangle going down. Moloch and Kium forming one star with 6 points, which was called the Talisman of Saturn. So it is a talisman of Saturn, and it had the 6-pointed star with an ox or a calf in the middle of it. So they made a golden calf to worship Moloch and Kium. And the sacrifice that they made for 40 years were not to Yahweh, were to Moloch and Kium, even though they thought they were to Yahweh. That is important because those 40 years represent the 40 Jubilees, the 2,000 years from Mashiach to our time. So during the past 2,000 years, they have been worshiping the same entities, Moloch and Kium, and even Azazel, claiming and thinking that they are worshiping the Almighty Creator, the true Mighty One. So when we tell them, they say, no, but he has answered my prayers. That is because he's compassionate. It doesn't mean that it is because you have been worshiping the right one. I hope that is understood because it is very important. And you took up the tent of Molech and the star of your mighty one Kium, images which you made to bow before them. Therefore, I shall remove you beyond Babel. Beyond Babel. Now, the Saturn talisman. So you see the 6-pointed star with the ox or golden calf in the middle. The Star of David, deception. So it was saying, yet you. So even when they made a molded calf for themselves and said, this is your mighty one that brought you out of Mizraim, that brought you up out of Mizraim and worked great blasphemies. Yet you in your great compassion did not forsake them in the wilderness, just like Yahweh did not forsake those who believe in scriptures, who believe in the coming of the Son of the Most High to die for our sins. Yahweh has not forsaken them. He's leading them to know the truth, yet sadly, most will reject that truth because they have become confident in the lie. They have become comfortable. I mean, yeah, they are comfortable not knowing the truth. The column of the cloud did not turn away from them by day to lead them on the way, nor the column of fire by night to give them light in the way they were to go. You also gave your good spirit. You also gave your good spirit to instruct them. As we know, the Ruach HaKodesh was given through Mashiach for 40 Jubilees ago. You also gave your good spirit to instruct them, and did not withhold your manna from their mouth, and gave them water for their thirst. Once again, he gave them the heavenly bread and the living water. And for 40 years, like the 40 Jubilees, you sustained them in the wilderness. They lacked not. Their garments did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. Their garments did not wear out, and their feet did not swell. So Yahweh kept them completely in every way, even their clothing, for their garments did not wear out. As we know, garments represent the body, the garments that clothe the body, just like the body covers the soul. And the feet, which are the last part of the body, are connected with the good news, preaching the good news, as we see in Ephesians chapter 6. Their garments did not wear out, like Yahweh keeping our health, and their feet did not swell. And you gave them reigns and peoples, and apportioned them their lot. So they took possession of the land of Sihon, and the land of the sovereign of Heshbon, and the land of Og, sovereign of Bashan. These three, and you gave them reigns and peoples, just like the last will receive the reign over the many, and the many will receive the reign over the peoples, the nations. And you gave them reigns and peoples, few and many, and apportioned them their lot when Yahweh separates the earth amongst his chosen. So they took possession of the land of Sihon as Samael, and the land of the sovereign of Heshbon, Lucifer, and the land of Og, sovereign of Bashan, Azazel. So three giants that were destroyed by Israel in order to take their land. Those three giants are connected with the three Satans, Samael, Hillel, and Azazel. And you increased their children as the stars of the heavens. And just in case, also, these three are pretty much like a evil copy of the three that Yahweh sends to the world. Mashiach, who is the life, Eliyahu, who prepares the way for Mashiach, and the last, who is the prophet, who gives testimony of Mashiach. So there are three that Yahweh would send, as we also see in John 1 when they went to speak to John the Baptist. So there are three that would come from Yahweh. So that's why Satan also, or evil, manifested in three entities: Samael, Hillel, and Azazel. Samael is the one that represents wickedness, darkness itself. Death came from Samael, just like life comes from Mashiach. Hillel is a lamp, just like the last is the son of righteousness. Hillel ben Shachar, as he is called in Isaiah 14. He has light, but he used it to pretty much fool the people, made himself appear to them as the mighty one, as the light. He was supposed to use the Torah to lead or have control over this earth, for he is the mighty one of this world. Yet he used it to accuse and became the accuser. So he believes to be perfect, and therefore he points the finger at every human who has broken the law that he holds. So that's why Mashiach comes and shows the true fulfillment of the law through the spirit and not through the letter, which was under Hillel, by giving the truth. So once the truth is revealed, the lie can manifest, the lie being Azazel, the false Messiah. So 2,000 years Samael, 2,000 years Hillel, 2,000 years Azazel, the 6,000 years of human history. So Lucifer is the one who's being worshipped as God. That's why God in Hebrew is fortune. Lucifer is also the origin of the word luck, for Lucifer is the god of fortune, is God, as we see in Isaiah 65. And Azazel is the one who pretends to be the son, who pretends to be the one who comes from God. So when you see only Samael as Satan, like the Jewish people do, then you end up worshiping Lucifer. When you see Lucifer as Satan, as Christians do, you end up worshiping Azazel. When you don't follow the Torah and you don't follow scriptures to become spiritual, you end up worshiping Samael by being an atheist, for instance, being blind spiritually, and etc., etc. So, Sihon, the land of the sovereign of Heshbon, and the land of Og, sovereign of Bashan. And you increased their children as the stars of the heavens, which was the promise that Yahweh made to Yitzhak and Abraham. And you increased their children as the stars of the heavens, and brought them into the land which you had said to their fathers to go in and possess. This is referring to the few, as we also see in Daniel 12, who will become like the stars of heaven. The many will become like the sand by the sea. The few will be gathered with the clouds and taken above the firmament to sing the song of Moshe and the Lamb, therefore like the stars of the heavens, for they will be above the firmament. And brought them into the land which you had said to their fathers to go in and possess. So the sons went in and possessed the land, and you humbled before them the people of the land, the Canaanites, and gave them into their hands with their sovereigns and the people of the land, and to do with them as they desired. And they captured walled cities in a rich land, and possessed houses filled with all good, cisterns already dug, vineyards and olive trees and fruit trees, and in plenty. So all the things that Yahweh gave us when he gave us the land. And they captured walled cities and a rich land, and possessed houses filled with all good, cisterns already dug, vineyards and olive trees and fruit trees in plenty. So they ate and were satisfied and grew fat, and delighted themselves in your great goodness. But they became disobedient and rebelled against you, and cast your Torah behind their backs, just like they did when they made the doctrine that says that Mashiach abolished the Torah. They threw the Torah behind their backs, not caring about it, thinking that the Old Testament is not to be read anymore because it's just something that is old and doesn't work as they would interpret it. But they became disobedient and rebelled against you, and cast your Torah behind their backs. And they killed your prophets who had warned them to bring them back to yourself, and they worked great blasphemies. So look at that. And they killed your prophets just like they would kill the two witnesses who had warned them. That's what they would do all the time. Every time they would stray, Yahweh would send a prophet. They would hate the prophet. They would kill the prophet. There were a lot of people who claimed to be prophets, and they were telling the people what they wanted to hear. those prophets would not be killed, for they were false prophets like nowadays. But the true prophets say that which people don't want to hear. And that's why people hate them and end up killing them until everything is fulfilled and those prophets are known to be sent by the Most High. So, and they kill your prophets who had warned them to bring them back to yourself. That is the point of the prophets, to bring the people back to Yahweh. That's why the prophets, the two witnesses, need the way of Yahweh in order to bring the people back to Yahweh through Yahushua, who is the way. And they worked great blasphemies. Therefore, you gave them into the hand of their enemies who distressed them. And in the time of their distress, when they cried to you, you heard from the heavens. And according to your great compassion, you gave them saviors who saved them from the hand of their enemies. But they had rest. They turned back to do evil before you. Look how that happened over and over again. Happened once over here. So they ate and were satisfied and grew fat. They were so satisfied, so fat, that they became disobedient and rebelled. Sadly, that happens a lot. When people are doing good, they forget about the Most High. When they are having success, they forget who gave them that success. And they become proud, disobedient, rebellious. And that is why suffering has to happen, so that people may go back to their creator, to their source. So in theory, and I say theory because affliction is part of this reality, and we know Mashiach never sinned and went through what he went through, a lot of affliction, a lot of pain. But in general, if we remain with the Most High, if we seek his presence, if we look to please him by following his commandments, then we will be fine. Affliction will not come from the heavens in order to bring us back to him. But we see here, so they ate and were satisfied and grew fat and delighted themselves in your great goodness, but they became disobedient and rebelled against you and cast your Torah behind their backs. So he sent saviors. But after they had rest, once again. So when people find rest, they start thinking about things that they shouldn't. So that's why also Yahweh gave a lot of work to people. That's why a lot of people have to work so much nowadays, because if they didn't, they would be doing a lot of evil. For they would be having rest and therefore having their mind in things that they shouldn't, as sadly humans have acted for all human history. But after they had rest, they turned back to the evil, to do evil before you. And that is how it normally happens. That's why it is so hard for a rich person to enter heaven, because those riches make that person go away from the Most High and his commandments. But after they had rest, they turned back to do evil before you. Then you left them in the hand of their enemies, so that they ruled over them. But when they turned back and cried out to you, you heard from the heavens and delivered them according to your compassion many times, for they did that many times, and warned them to bring them back to your Torah. But they acted proudly and did not obey your commands and sinned against your right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them, as it is written in the Torah. Leviticus 18:5. And sin against your right rulings, which if a man does, he shall live by them. And they gave the rebellious shoulder and hardened their necks and would not hear. So they hardened their necks not to look back to the Almighty whom they left. They had a rebellious shoulder not to carry the burden of commandments. and would not hear, for they became deaf as their idols. They could not hear the word of Yahweh. Like the many won't be able to hear, for they are like the idols, and they cannot hear the voice of Yahweh, who is the good shepherd, to become the sheep of the chosen. They gave the rebellious shoulder and hardened their necks and would not hear. And you had patience with them for many years. You had patience with them for many years, and did warn them by your ruach, by the hand of your prophets, yet they would not give ear. Therefore you gave them into the hand of the peoples of the lands. But in your great compassion, you did not make an end of them, nor forsake them, for you are an El of favor and compassion. But in your great compassion, you did not make an end of them, nor forsake them, for you are a mighty one of favor and compassion. And now, our Elohim, the great, the mighty, and awesome El, guarding the covenant and the loving commitment, let not all the trouble that has come upon us, our sovereigns and our heads, our priests and our prophets, our fathers, and on all your people, from the days of the sovereigns of Ashur until this day, seem little before you. So verse 32, Ve'ata Eloheinu, Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, Behanorah. And now our Elohim, the mighty one, the great one, the warrior, also mighty one. Our Elohim, the great, the mighty, and awesome El. That was Norah, that had to do with the one who enlightens. Guarding the covenant and the loving commitment. This is important. Guarding the covenant, like the first who came to fulfill the Torah and make a new covenant. Guarding the covenant, the first, and the loving commitment, the last. Let not, the last comes to fulfill or confirm the covenant and finish the commitment that Yahweh had with the people. Let not all the trouble that has come upon us, our sovereigns and our heads, our priests and our prophets, our fathers and all your people, from the days of the sovereigns of Ashur until this day, seem little before you. And in all that has come upon us, you are righteous, for you have done truth, but we have done wrong. And our sovereigns, our rulers, our priests, our fathers have not done your Torah, nor heeded your commandments and your witnesses, with which you witnessed against them, nor heeded your commands, like what Mashiach came to do, and your witnesses, like the two witnesses, with which you witnessed against them. Important, against them, not in favor, against them. That's why people will hate the two witnesses, because the witness will be against the people, against what they have been doing, against the doctrines of the world, against the great whore, which many see as their mother, as their loving church. For they have not served you in their reign or in your great goodness that you gave them. So as I was saying, and our sovereigns, our rulers, our priests, and our fathers have not done your Torah, nor heeded your commands and your witnesses, with which you witnessed against them. For they have not served you in their reign or in your great goodness that you gave them, or in the large and rich land which you set before them, neither turned back from their evil deeds. See, we are servants today, just like Israel in Mizraim, and just like most people nowadays, serving sin, or servants to a government, to whatever boss, whatever it may be. See, we are servants today, and the land that you gave to our fathers to eat its fruit and the good of it, see, we are servants in it. And its rich yield goes to the sovereigns you have set over us. Just like nowadays, the people of Yahweh are servants wherever they may be, and those who are sovereigns over the people are the ones with all the riches, all the power over the land, over the world. And they don't have enough. That's why they want everybody locked in their houses, everybody having cover over their faces, getting an injection that can kill you, etc. And its rich yield goes to the sovereigns you have set over us because of our sins, and they rule over our bodies. And they rule over our bodies, so much so, and we see how it connects with our time, that they are wanting to mandate the injection. That would mean that they have complete rule over people's bodies if they can tell them what to inject in them, even if it's poison. And they rule over our bodies. That's what they want to do. And they are showing with all the people that are listening and going and getting those things that they're telling them to get. And our livestock at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. As the great tribulation that will happen in this end times. And because of all this, we are making a trustworthy pledge and write it. And our rulers, our Levites, our priests set their seal on it. And because of all this, we are making a trustworthy pledge and write it. And our rulers, our Levites, our priests set their seal on it. And that's how the chapter ends.